Hi there. Welcome to From Mild to Wild and everything in between. Today we're going to discuss torquing the rod bolts. This is things that you have to be very, very careful about. Now, let me take this pan off. There's several ways of torque methods that you can use to do any type of nut. I don't know if you've seen a torque wrench. We use it to torque the mains, but this is a torque wrench. You've got a torque angle gauge. This is a relatively new product within the past few years, and this works okay. The method that we're going to use today is called the stretch method. What you're trying to do is you're trying to develop a specific clamping force on them rod bolts. The only way you could truly test them is to stretch the bolt to a specific thousandths, and that will give you the exact dimension that you're looking for. Now let me go over what we did last week. You remember last week we put the pistons and rods into the block assembly, and I told you to put the moly lube on and go ahead and just tighten them up finger tight so you can revolve the motor around to get all 8 pistons in. I'm assuming that you've already done that. Well, we have here. Now what I want to do is I want to pay close attention to torque. You're going to find that I spent the day yesterday torquing these bolts with different lubricants, because all lubricants are not equal. They have different properties where they make them either more slippery or less slippery. So you're going to get a big variation, which I'm going to show you with numbers so you understand what I'm talking about. The first thing you want to do now with this particular rod manufacturer, he wants you to go in there and get your bolts down and torque them to 60 feet-pounds 3 times. So you're going to torque them to 60 going in 10-pound increments. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Once you get them to 60, you back them back down to 0, and you go again. You bring them back up to 60. Now what I do is I actually, when I get to 60 the second time, I put the stretch gauge on the bolt to see how many pounds of stretch I'm getting at 60 pounds. And we'll show you how we did that on paper in a moment. So you've actually got your 3 times you've torqued these bolts to 60. Now you back them off one more time. Now you're going to start to torque them for the final sequence. First thing you've got to do, and here's that stretch gauge that I referred to, these bolts have got a dimple in the top and in the bottom. You're going to be measuring the difference in thousandths between one end to the other end. Now, this particular bolt comes up being 8 thousandths. I've zeroed out this gauge just as a starting point. You're finding here that this final dimension is 8 thousandths. Now, this is rod bolt, the upper rod bolt on number 1. I want to look and see what it was when we first started yesterday. The upper bolt on number 1 was at 3 thousandths before I started to put any pressure on. As you can see right now by the gauge, we're at 8 thousandths. What you're looking for, the accepted measurement is anywhere from 4.5 to 6 thousandths of stretch. You're actually stretching that bolt. So your minimum would be 4.5, your maximum would be 6. I like to fall in anywhere between 5 to 5.5 thousandths when I do my engine assemblies. Now you can see it's a very easy task. You measure one side, you call this the upper bolt, and you go down the other side and you call that the lower bolt, no matter what one you're using. Number your piston rods going back 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. Now you can actually do these 2 while they're up. Once you get these 2 done, then you revolve the motor a little bit to take the second 2. But I want to show you, I used the combination of 2 moly lubes yesterday. The first moly lube, which was back here that I used, which was pure moly lube, in order to get a 5,000 stretch on that bolt, it only took me 65 pounds of pressure. That's that torque wrench I'm referring to. You remember how it went click, click when it got to a specific setting? Okay, so these back two right here only took me 65 pounds to get 5 thousandths of stretch. I went through on the next three and used a different manufacturer's lubrication. Now this is where it threw me way off, because I was actually at 80 pounds of pressure and I only had 2 to 2.5 thousandths of stretch. Now what this tells me, like I've told you before, you want to make sure that all your thread surfaces are cleaned thoroughly. This lubrication did not have enough friction, or it was lacking the friction that it needed to allow that bolt to slide up in there easy and come to the dimension. It was actually dragging on the threads. So consequently, you're actually digging those threads up, and you were having to apply more pressure to stretch that bolt to the 5 thousandths that we're looking for. So I took them apart. I didn't clean them out thoroughly. I took them apart and added a second lubricant to it. Now, you may have a 50-50, a 60-40, a 30-70 mix of these two lubricants. And this is what I wanted to bring to your attention. When I went back in there combining the two, let's say the good one with the bad one, the torque sequence became totally different. And I'm going to show you. The upper bolt here, I had to torque to 75 pounds to get the 5 thousandths stretch. On that same rod, the lower bolt, I had to go to 79 pounds to get that same stretch. Now, for you mechanics that are out there that are used to doing this, you normally go 65 or 70 pounds on both sides. Well, if you went 65 or 70 pounds on both sides and then walked away from it, it was wrong. Because you see, I had to go an additional 4 pounds of pressure to get those bolts at a 5 thousandths stretch. I wanted to bring this to your attention, not just to my students that are watching, but also to you professional guys out there. A lot of you may not realize that the preferred way to do these bolts is the stretch method. Just showing you those two, for instances, most of them ended up being a 70 and a 65, a 72 and a 69, 69, 74, 75, 79. So on that same rod cap, you see that the good moly lube, they both went to 65 and stretched 5 thousandths. On the inferior grade of moly lube, even when I combined them with a good grade of moly lube, they still did not come up to that 65 pounds. This poundage may vary from motor to motor, but in this particular instance, I wanted to bring it to your attention that 65 seems to be the key number. So just for future reference, when you're torquing, make sure that you clean those threads thoroughly, both the male and the female. Make sure that you can thread them down in there by hand, that there's no obstruction. You've done your job as far as getting the debris out of there. Now when it comes to lubricant, make sure that you choose the right lubricant, or do as I did. I really don't care. I could actually done these bolts dry. I was concerned with how far they stretched. It may have taken me 100 or 125 pounds to stretch them to 5 thousandths, but the stretch method is the preferred way of doing it. Now, we'll show you this paper in a moment. You're going to go through and torque all your rods. It's a good time now to go back and double check your mains. Don't forget, we torque these mains at 70 pounds. Before we get to turn this motor upright, I want you to make sure that you've checked the mains again. You've torqued your rods properly using the stretch method. and with the specific lubricant that you have to have. Now you've got one more thing to do to the bottom end here. You've got to check the clearance between the two rods. Now, the manufacturer will tell you what clearance he's looking for. On our particular motor, we run an 18,000, so I've got an 18,000 feeler gauge there, and I'm going to put it right down between those two rod bolts. A 19 or a 20 won't go through there. You want a nice snug, as you draw that feeler gauge, you want a nice snug fit. Ours comes in at 18. We're a little bit looser than normal because of the way we use this motor. You'll find if you're looking into the book anywhere from a 10, a 9 or 10 to a 14 thousandths end gap is fine. We do ours a little bit different, but your rod manufacturer would tell you a min-max figure. Don't just go ahead and guess at it. You don't want them too tight, you don't want them too loose. But because of the application, we go a little bit looser because as this motor gets real hot, they expand and the tolerances do decrease. So it's not like they get bigger, they actually get smaller as the engine gets hotter. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn the motor over. You've completed your rotating assembly. You've got your crank rods, pistons, rings in. Your rotating assembly is complete. Now we're going to concentrate on the cam assembly. And to do that, I've got to turn the motor around. Okay, we've got the motor positioned now where you can see it a little bit better. The first thing we're going to do is put this lower gear on. You can see that this is actually a double roller chain. This is what they call a true roller timing chain. There's actually double rollers that go through it. The one you're going to be looking at that you took out of your motor had one tooth all the way across. Now I don't want you to hit these on with a hammer. There's a tool that they make, and I'm going to show you the tool. This is an old harmonic balancer which I cut the big large circle off and I filed out the inside so I can fit this over that keyway and up against that gear snugly. Now this is the tool that you're going to use. It threads into the crankshaft. There's a bearing right here. Then there's a big nut that you turn. I'll show you just for time being here. You screw that into the crankshaft. Now you hold it with a 5/8 wrench on this end. Take your big wrench, and as you turn this big nut, it puts that bearing right up against there. Now with your big wrench, you turn that till it's snug, till it won't go any further. Now your gear is on there. Don't try to put these on with a punch and a hammer because you're going to do a lot of damage to them. Now you've got your bottom gear on. We've used the zero mark. I'm going to be talking more about this zero mark as we go into the top gear. But I'm using the zero mark and I put a white dot on the tooth that we're going to be lining it up with. Now let's put the cam in. Whatever cam that you buy, you're going to get a piece of paper with it that's going to give you all the dimensions of that camshaft. Lift, duration. The one that I'm concerned with on this cam is the lobe separation. We're going to be degreeing this cam in on what they call the center line method, which is very easy to do. You'll see as we start to do it. The number that I'm looking for off this card is 104 degrees. That's where they say this cam performs overall. If you want a little more bottom end or a little more top end, you could advance or retard the camshaft. So instead of putting it in at 104, you put it in at 102 or 100, you'll get better bottom end. If you put it in at 106 or 108, you'll get a better top end. So with the method of degreeing that we're going to be using, I want you to keep that 104 locked in your memory for now. For you guys that may have never seen a camshaft, this is a V8 camshaft. It's got 5 surfaces right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which ride on bearings that's in the block. Those are them cam bearings that I referred to. As I revolve it a little bit, you're going to see these little porcupine lobes that are all staggered. You've got an intake and exhaust on each cylinder, and these are timed perfectly to open up the intake or exhaust valve as it revolves. Now here's how you put this camshaft in. I've got a handy little tool which gives me a little better leverage over here, but I've done it with just the timing chain, the gear itself. Now, the first thing you want to do, and I've already done it, and you've heard me refer to strawberry jelly. Don't go to the refrigerator and get this jelly jar out. This is really not jelly. It's a nickname that they call this, but this is actually an oil lubricant. You've heard me say strawberry jelly probably several times. That's the slang word for it. So don't think it's jam or jelly or anything of this nature. This is a very good lubricant that'll stay on your parts so you don't scuff it. I catch myself sometimes talking about things that I'm familiar with. The slang word is what I'm familiar with, but it's not jelly. It's actually a lubricant that you're using. Now, I'm going to grab this cam and just start to slide it in to the block. And you've got to feel around for the holes because you can't see there. You may have to pick it up a little bit or twist it around, but you definitely want to go very slow. You don't want to be jamming it into those nice new bearings and putting a notch or a groove in them. So you can see I go very easy, just wiggling it a little bit. Now I've got a nice handle here to hold this to get it up in the final bearing. There. Now, let me take this off. This lubricant that I'm using is very slippery, and the right hand isn't working too well to get it off. And this is the tool. You see how it gives me a lot more leverage. It's actually got 3 bolt holes which go to the front of that camshaft, and it gives me the levers that I need to actually pick it up and down to get it back in there. That's a nice little investment for yourself. Now you're going to take, we're going to be putting the chain on. This is the gear that I'm using. This is not a cast gear. This is a billet steel gear, same bicycle chain design. Now this particular gear, it's what they call a hex adjust. You're going to see me be able to turn this cam and get it to that 104 degrees by just adjusting a screw in the front of this belt here. Now, all the gears that I get are the better gears that have got a Torrington bearing on the back side. And you see that? This gear is actually machined where there's a needle bearing that rides between this gear and the block. They're a little more expensive, but they keep from doing damage to your block or to the gear. You put a generous amount of lubricant on there. Now that lubricant that I'm using here is a little thinner viscosity, so it'll actually bleed down into the bearing. Get your chain. See how I put the chain on the gear. Now I've got to get my little with this little unit right here. It's the hex adjust. It's actually elongated, so if I turn it, it's going to turn that camshaft 2, 4, or 6 degrees, depending on where I want to set it. Okay, I've got my hex adjust in. Now what you're going to do is come down. You've got a mark, which I'll show you after. You're going to be lining up your 2 marks. Give it just a little twist here. I'm going to have to reposition the motor so you can see it a little bit better. Take your 3 bolts. 1, 2, and 3. You've got it in there. Now just bring your bolts up snug. Okay, now what I want to do at this time, we're going to turn the motor once more facing forward, only because I've got to put some specific tools on this motor in order for you to see me degree this camshaft in. At this stage, I want you to make sure that you've got your bottom gear on, your top gear on, with your 3 bolts in snug. I don't want you to tighten them up yet because we've got to adjust this camshaft to get it up to top dead center. So for next week's program, we're going to come in here and show you how to degree the cam in. I've got a few more minutes before the program ends, and I want to mention last week I gave you a toll-free number to call in case you needed some help. It's an anonymous type of phone call. This week I like to say that there is someone very close to you that if you do have a drug problem or a friend that has a drug problem, you can always go to your teacher. The teacher that you see every day in school would be more than happy to listen to you. He could probably guide you into the right direction to get some help. What we're trying to do here is to get you some help. Just like in the motor, we're trying to teach you to ask the right questions. By showing you all the various pieces that we use, we're giving your mind the ability to say what, when, or where. You have to always ask the right questions. So if you've got a friend or yourself that has maybe a little drug problem, you don't know who to talk to, by all means go to your teacher. I'm sure you've got a favorite teacher. As old as I am, I've still got teachers that I see on a daily basis when I take my daughter to school, and I always stop and chat with them. They were teachers to me as a young fella, and they're friends to me now that I'm middle-aged. So you can always rely on one of your teachers. Matter of fact, I'll tell you a little story. I have a favorite teacher friend of mine who I gave a check for $1 million to. That's what I feel this person is worth to me. You know, teachers, they're underpaid. They don't get the recognition that they should. So I gave my friend a check post-dated for Christmas for $1 million. I told him, don't run right down to the bank and cash it though. One way or the other, by whatever means I have to do, I'm going to someday make that check good for him. Just as I says, he's a school teacher. He's dedicated. They want to help kids. Matter of fact, I feel that that's the most important profession because you could not be a doctor or a lawyer if there wasn't that teacher there to show you how to do it. Who taught you how to be that doctor? Who taught you how to be that lawyer? That's right, that school teacher. He doesn't get the pay that he should get, but someday he will, and someday my friend will be able to cash that check for $1 million because that's what I feel he's worth. I guess without any further delay, I got to ask you before I go, does anybody remember my motto? That's right. Do drags, not drugs, and I'll see you at the racetrack.